I never believed in anything beyond what my eyes could see. I grew up thinking that life was only what science could explain, that God was just a story to comfort the weak. Diving was my passion, my escape, where I found peace in the silence of the ocean depths. Down there, in the deep blue, I felt in control, as if the world belonged only to me. But deep inside, there was an emptiness I refused to admit, a restlessness that even the sea couldn't calm. A convinced atheist, I used to mock anyone who spoke about faith or Jesus. To me, miracles were fairy tales and deliverance was nothing but luck. My life was good, or so I thought. I had my job, my friends, my adventures. But looking back now, I see that something was missing. Purpose, something greater that would make me feel truly alive. I dove into the waters, but without realizing it, I was sinking into myself, lost and directionless. That day, I prepared my gear as usual, confident, ready for the next dive. It was an underwater cave, a challenge I was eager to conquer. I had no idea that down there, something was waiting to confront me, not just the darkness of the cave, but something that would change everything I believed in. The presence of God, whom I had always denied, was closer than I could ever imagine. I descended into the sea with the confidence of someone who had done it 1,000 times. My equipment was checked, the plan laid out, and the cave before me was just another obstacle to overcome. Diving had always been my refuge, where the silence of the deep drowned out life's noise. But that day felt different, like a shadow hovered over the water. As I swam toward the cave's entrance, a chill ran down my spine, as if the sea itself was warning me of something that, as a devoted atheist, I could never imagine. The cave was narrow, its stone walls swallowing the beam of my flashlight. I pressed on, adrenaline rushing, until suddenly my foot got stuck in a crevice. I tried pulling, pushing, but the rock wouldn't give. Panic started to rise. I looked at my oxygen gauge. The needle was dropping fast, and every second felt like an eternity. For the first time, I felt a fear I couldn't explain, a void that even my disbelief couldn't ignore. Down there, trapped at the bottom of the sea, I began to think of Jesus, a name I had always mocked. As I struggled against the rock, my mind spun in circles. I, who never believed in miracles, started to wonder, what if there's something beyond what I can see? What if the faith I ridiculed was more real than I thought? My oxygen was running low, panic squeezing my chest, but in the middle of the chaos, a strange calm surrounded me. It felt as if God's presence, the one I had always denied, was there, whispering that I wasn't alone. My mind said it was just fear playing tricks on me, but my heart felt something different. The more I fought, the weaker I became, and the darkness of the cave felt alive, as if it wanted to swallow me whole. But that calm didn't leave. It grew like invisible hands holding me. I thought about my life, about all the times I thought I was enough, living without any greater purpose. There, trapped, I began to realize that maybe my transformation was being written in that very moment. What was that presence? And why, in the middle of despair, did I feel a peace that made no sense? I didn't know how much time I had left, but the oxygen gauge was flashing red. Every breath was a struggle, and my vision began to blur. Still, that feeling of not being alone kept me conscious, as if someone or something was guiding me. My resistance to the supernatural was crumbling, and for the first time, I opened myself to the possibility of deliverance. What would happen next? I couldn't imagine, but something inside me told me that the bottom of the sea would be the beginning of a transformation. My oxygen was almost gone, every breath a weight on my chest, as if the sea itself was crushing me. My vision was fading, and the darkness of the cave felt like an endless void, just like the life I had lived before, without faith, without purpose. Then suddenly, in the middle of the despair, a golden light appeared, dim at first, but growing as if it danced in the water. It wasn't my flashlight. It had already gone out. It was something else, something that warmed my frozen heart. For the first time, I felt that Jesus, a name I had always denied, might actually be there somehow, watching me. I couldn't understand what I was seeing, but that light brought a peace that made no sense. My rational mind screamed that it was just a hallucination, the brain deprived of oxygen playing tricks. But deep down, so deep, something whispered that it was more than that it was God's presence surrounding me. I thought of my life, of all the times I mocked those who believed in miracles, and I felt ashamed. There, trapped. I began to wonder if that glow was a sign, an invitation to a transformation I had never wanted. As the light grew brighter, I felt as though invisible hands touched my shoulders, gently pulling me upward. It wasn't physical strength. It was a feeling that eased my panic and slowed my breathing, even with the tank nearly empty. I, who had never believed in deliverance, started to feel that something greater was holding me. My disbelief, which had always been my armor, began to crack, and a fragile faith sprouted, like a seed in dry soil. What was happening to me? Was it real, or just desperation? The light seemed to guide my eyes toward a gap in the rock, a path I hadn't noticed before. With a strength I can't explain, I managed to move my foot slightly, feeling the stone give way. I can't describe it, but it was as if God's presence was giving me strength, showing me there was still hope. My life, which until then had felt meaningless, began to take shape, as if a purpose was being written into it. But I was still trapped, and my oxygen wouldn't last much longer. Every second was a battle, but that golden light didn't fade. It wrapped around me like an embrace I didn't deserve. I didn't know what would happen next, but something in me was changing. My resistance to Jesus, to faith, to everything I'd called fantasy was crumbling. In the middle of the sea, at the bottom of that cave, I felt something supernatural unfolding. What did that light mean? And why did I feel I wasn't alone? With my foot still trapped and oxygen nearly gone, I felt time slipping away, but the golden light remained, shining in the darkness of the cave. It seemed to guide me, pointing toward the narrow gap I could barely see. Suddenly, I felt a gentle pull, as if invisible hands were helping me move my foot. I don't know where the strength came from, but the rock gave way, and I was free. In that moment, a strange certainty filled me. This was a miracle, something only the presence of God could explain. I began to rise slowly, my heart pounding, following the light that danced ahead of me like a beacon in the storm. My mind, which had always denied Jesus, now fought against a truth I could no longer ignore. I, who had laughed at stories of deliverance, was living one, and every stroke upward was proof of it. The fear was still there, but a new, fragile faith began to grow, as if something inside me was awakening. It was as if the sea that almost swallowed me was now giving me a new purpose. As I neared the surface, I saw figures above me, the rescue team closing in. But what struck me most wasn't their faces. It was the feeling that someone else had been there with me. The golden light was gone, but the peace it left behind remained, as if Jesus himself had been there, holding my hand. My life, once so certain in its disbelief, now trembled before something greater. I couldn't explain it, but I knew that a transformation had begun in my heart. As they pulled me out of the water, gasping, exhausted, I heard the rescuers say something that sent chills down my spine. The sonar had detected a human movement inside the cave, where there was no one but me. My chest tightened, not from fear but from awe. As an atheist, I would have called it a glitch, a technical error. But there, soaked and alive, I began to wonder, what if it was God's presence, guiding me to safety? My mind spun with questions I had never dared to ask before. I was safe, but something much greater was happening. Every breath I took felt like a gift, a call to rethink everything I had ever believed. That moment in the depths wasn't just about escaping death. It was about finding a meaning I had never sought. My transformation was only beginning, and I felt that something or someone still had more to show me. What would come next, I didn't know, but my heart was no longer the same. Lying in the boat, with air finally returning to my lungs, I was still shaking, not just from the cold, but from what I had experienced down there. The rescuers talked about the sonar, that human movement they couldn't explain, and I felt a chill that wasn't from the wind. For the first time, I, who had always denied anything beyond science, couldn't ignore the presence of God. That deliverance wasn't just luck, it was a miracle, proof that Jesus, whom I had so often rejected, was there in some way. My mind was spinning, trying to understand what my heart was already starting to accept. Wrapped in a blanket, warming up, I looked out at the calm sea and thought about my life before that dive. I thought I had everything under control, that my disbelief was strength, but now I could see how fragile it really was. That moment in the cave with the golden light and the feeling of hands guiding me had planted a seed of faith I could no longer deny. It was as if God was calling me to a change, showing that there was a purpose bigger than my adventures in the depths of the sea. But I still resisted, afraid of what believing might mean. I spoke with one of the rescuers, a soft-spoken guy who mentioned Jesus without hesitation, as if he knew what I had felt. He said, "Sometimes God uses danger to wake us up." That hit me like a wave. I, who had laughed at stories of transformation, was now in the middle of one. I didn't tell him about the light or the invisible hands, but I kept every word in my mind, feeling that something in me was changing. The atheist I had been seemed distant, as if the sea had taken a part of me away. Back on solid ground, people hugged me, relieved, but I couldn't connect with their joy. My mind was still in the cave, with that light, with that deliverance that defied everything I believed. I began to wonder, what if Jesus was really calling me? What if that miracle was the start of something bigger? For the first time, I felt curiosity about God, about faith, about what my life could be. But accepting it meant facing who I had been for so long. Night fell, and I couldn't sleep, with the sound of the sea still echoing in my head. Every wave seemed to whisper questions I had never wanted to answer. Who was I without my disbelief? What did it mean to follow that light I had seen? The transformation beginning inside me was frightening, but it also brought a hope I had never known. Something told me that the next step would be even deeper, as if God had more to reveal to me. Back in my routine, the world seemed the same, but I was no longer the guy who mocked Jesus and any talk of faith. That deliverance in the depths of the sea was etched into me like a scar, unexplained but undeniable. I began noticing small things, the way the sun hit the ocean, conversations about God I used to ignore. The golden light and those invisible hands still echoed in my mind. And for the first time, I found myself wanting to understand what God's presence was. It was scary, but something inside me longed for this life change. I decided to visit a church, something my old self would have found ridiculous. I entered timidly, heart tight, hoping to find answers or at least a fraction of the peace I felt in the cave. The pastor spoke about miracles, about how Jesus finds those who are lost, and every word seemed like a mirror of my own story. I felt a warmth in my chest, as if faith was taking shape, not just an idea, but something alive. My disbelief, which had always been my fortress, was starting to crumble, making room for a purpose I didn't yet understand. I talked to a friend who had always spoken about God and hesitantly told him what I experienced in the sea. He smiled and said, "We didn't choose Jesus. He chose you." That made me stop. I thought about the sonar, the human movement no one explained, and the light that guided me. It was a miracle. There was no other word. My transformation was happening, but I still wrestled with doubts. Did I deserve this? Could I really change who I'd been for so long? I started reading the Bible, something I never imagined doing. The stories of deliverance, of broken people finding purpose, spoke directly to me. Every verse felt like an invitation to leave my old self behind, to embrace a life with meaning. But it wasn't easy. My mind still tried to rationalize everything, to say it was just a coincidence. Yet, deep down, I knew that God's presence in the cave wasn't imagination. It was real, and it was calling me to something greater. The nights, once only for sleep or exhaustion, were now for reflection. I wondered, what if that dive wasn't an accident but a plan? What if God used the depths of the sea to show me a new path? The faith I had never wanted was now a small but growing flame, illuminating the dark corners of my soul. Something told me that this journey was just beginning, that there was more to discover about Jesus and about myself. Every day after the dive felt like an invitation to look at my life with new eyes. Faith, which I once saw as weakness, was now an anchor, holding me steady amid lingering doubts. I began to pray, awkwardly, speaking to Jesus as if he were sitting beside me. The presence of God, which I had felt so strongly in the cave, now seemed to follow me like a silent guide. My life change wasn't just about believing. It was about finding a purpose that gave meaning to every breath. I returned to the sea, but now with a different heart. Before, diving was just adrenaline, a way to prove I controlled everything. Now, every wave reminded me of the miracle I had lived through, of the deliverance that defied my disbelief. While swimming, I felt gratitude, something new to me. I talked to other divers about what happened, and for the first time, I wasn't ashamed to mention Jesus. Some laughed, as I would have before, but others listened, curious, as if my story sparked something in them. I began helping a community near the beach, something my old self would never have done. Bringing food, listening to stories, being there for people. It gave me a meaning I never found in my diving trophies. The transformation in me was visible. Even my friends noticed I smiled more, seemed lighter. But sometimes I still ask myself, why me? Why did God choose to save me? These questions led me back to the Bible, where I found stories of people as flawed as I was, yet touched by grace. My routine changed. Less rush, more time to reflect and give thanks. I began to see that deliverance in the depths of the sea was a turning point, a moment when Jesus called me to something greater. My faith was still young, full of stumbles, but each step brought me closer to a purpose I never imagined having. I felt that God was shaping me, as if the sea had only been the beginning of a larger journey. And deep in my heart, I want to share this story with others. Walking along the beach one night, looking at the stars, I felt that peace again, the same as in the cave. It was as if God was telling me that there was still more ahead, more lessons, more encounters. My life, once only mine, now seemed part of something greater, a plan I was only beginning to understand. What would come next, I didn't know, but for the first time, I was ready to find out.